Hello and welcome to today's event on how district heating can help meet the EU's climate neutrality targets. My name is Dave Keating. I'm a journalist based in Brussels, and I'm coming at you live from the Euractiv studios in the heart of the EU quarter. Now, district heating networks, which are made up of hot water pipes running below the ground, supply millions of homes and cities across Europe, and they represent about 10% of the EU's heat markets. Now, many of these are legacy systems that are decades old, but recent challenges, most notably the fight against climate change and the energy security concerns brought on by the war in Ukraine, has brought these systems into a new focus as possible solutions to both of those issues. And they've spurred interest in how district heating systems can be further developed. The key question, though, is how can EU national and local policy encourage the development of new and legacy systems in a way that's optimized to face those two challenges? Should there be EU money allocated for their construction? And if so, should the approach be prescriptive, conditioning funding on partnering with specific technology or fuel? These are, after all, enormous and expensive systems, and funding is a key question to how these projects are realized. Today we're going to talk about how public policy is affecting the trajectory of district heating development, and in particular, we're going to talk about the place of district heating in the EU's Fit for 55 package. Now, earlier this year, the Polish Association of Professional Combined Heat and Power Plants, PTEZ, published a report looking at the implications for Poland, which has one of the largest markets for district heating in the EU. So, to get us started, I would like to introduce Paweł Steszek, who is Vice President of the Management Board for PTEZ and also PKEE, for some opening remarks. Paweł?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation to the debate of Euractiv and the Polish Electricity Association regarding the district heating sector, its transformation, and the impact of the Fit for 55 package on this process and on end users. The regulations of the Fit for 55 package are the first on history to have such a significant impact of the heating sector, especially EED, RED, EPBD, and ETS directives. I would like to emphasize that regulations of these directives will have a much greater impact on Poland than on other member states, due to the fact that it's one of the most populous EU countries with the same time the most difficult climate conditions, which result in a large demand for the heat. Over 40% of Poles use district heating. These are mainly city dwellers. The Polish Association of Professional Combined Heat and Power Plants, which I also represent, has prepared a report on the impact of the Fit for 55 package of Polish district heating. The report showed that meeting the requirements for the EU's Fit for 55 package will require, in Poland's case, depending on the scenario, expenditures of the more than 90 billion for decarbonization of the district heating sector. We are concerned about excessive burden of transformation costs on our users, especially concerning the provisions of the GBPR. Regarding the maximum intensity of state aid. However, we believe that the financing problem will be noticed by the EU institution, and will work to appropriate the solutions together, so as not to increase the burden on the final customers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pavel. We're going to talk about that in a little more detail. Now I'd like to bring up our panelists that we've assembled to talk about these issues. You guys can come on up on the podium now. I'll introduce you. So, to talk about this today, we have with us Mattis Lanniston, who is the Policy Officer for Energy Efficiency at the European Commission's Energy Department. We have Radan Kanev, a Bulgarian center-right MEP and a substitute member of the European Parliament's Environment Committee. We have Julian Joubert, Project Manager for Energy Systems and Planning at Energy Cities, who is joining us remotely. And we have Doroto Jeziorowska, who is Director of PTEZ. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Now, you all, whether you're watching it here live or online, will be able to ask your questions to the panelists using Slido. You can go ahead and scan. If you're here in the room, you'll see a barcode on the side of the wall. That's where you can scan to put your questions into Slido, or if you're watching online, you'll see it right there next to your screen. I'll be putting those questions to the panelists toward the end. So, Mattis, I'd like to start with a question for you. So we've talked already about the EU policy framework here, and specifically the Fit for 55 package. So how is the Fit for 55 package addressing district heating systems?
Thank you for the question, and good afternoon, everybody. So, yeah, indeed, the Fit for 55 package was a massive package in the EU. It consisted several policy documents and several proposals for the new legislative acts. And but what is most important part of the Fit for 55 package for the district heating are the proposal for the Energy Efficiency Directive that was recently adopted and published, and the Renewable Energy Directive that where we also have a political agreement and is near the completion. What these directives are saying to us is, first of all, the Energy Efficiency Directive introduces several measures that is addressing the district heating sector and district cooling sector. And the most important element of this particular legislative act is the definition of efficient district heating and cooling. So it's the core of this vision that the Commission has in the district heating sector. And this long-term vision that we have in the district heating sector is that this must contribute to the EU's general carbon neutrality target for 2050. And district heating sector is a competitive player when you talk about the specific costs of reducing the emissions. And what is the design of this definition? So it's a gradual tightening of the definition that is scheduled in the directive. There are specific thresholds for every 5-7 years, and I will not talk about these individual numbers, but what is most important narrative in this definition is that after 2035 there will be no support to the systems that use only fossil fuels. So after that date, there should be a contribution from the renewables available in the district heating system. And the second important consideration is that after 2045, the systems that can comply with the definition cannot have the feature that they are supplied from the high efficiency cogeneration based on the fossil fuels. There are also some other important requirements, namely that after 2030 there will be no support for the new investments using the fossil fuels. So this is a special consideration that was introduced in the last stage of the negotiations, and it's a part of the directive now. What are the implications of this particular definition? First of all, it sets the requirements related to the state aid. Secondly, there is a requirement for district heating systems above 5 megawatts that they should have a clear plan how to meet the definition of efficient district heating and cooling. So every 5 years they should renew this plan, and they should aim at achieving the standard of efficient district heating and cooling. In addition, there is one important element of the EED is that in all large municipalities having the population about 45,000, there should be a long-term heating and cooling plan. It means that in the 1,000 or roughly 1,000 largest European municipalities and cities, we're going to have much clearer understanding how to move towards the decarbonized heating and cooling, and also in the district heating. What is also important to remind that also the Renewable Energy Directive put the specific targets to the district heating sector, and besides this specific target for the heating and cooling sector decarbonization, annual target to how to increase the share of renewables in heating and cooling, there is a specific indicative target for the district heating to increase its annual contribution of renewables. So these are the main elements in the Fit for 55 package that are contributing this long-term ambition to decarbonize district heating sector. Thanks.
And just a quick follow-up question for you, Maris, because I think it's important for our discussion. You mentioned that after 2030, there can't be support for new investments in fossil fuels. Does that include an investment in, let's say, a district heating system that is combined with an existing fossil fuel plant?
Well, yeah, it's general requirement that whenever this system operator tries to meet the definition of the efficient district heating and cooling, there shouldn't be new investments made to the fossil fuel-based installations.
Okay, let's go to Rodin next. So we're talking here about the Fit for 55 framework, but how do you think that EU regulation, Fit for 55 or otherwise, can help facilitate district heating's role in decarbonization, particularly in countries that have a legacy of these systems?
Yes, by the way, one of the key legislations regarding district heating is certainly EPBD, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, which is under very difficult trial of negotiations now. It uses the Energy Efficiency Directive definition, but requires a building to be connected, for example, to this high efficiency district heating in order to have a highest grade of energy performance certificate. Which, by the way, being the proposal of the Commission, shows some very different trend in different parts of Europe. For Northwestern Europe, mostly heated by individual gas boilers for the separate buildings, never mind one-family buildings or building blocks. District heating has been in many debates, including the EPBD debate, a kind of silver bullet, the way to get rid of gas boilers and to find a new way of effective heating for a whole neighborhood. Whereas in Central and Eastern Europe, not everywhere, but for example, Poland and Bulgaria, our countries are two good examples. The district heating is the existing status quo, and far from a silver bullet, I must say, in its existing circumstances. And which is, I would say, much more important because I've been in quite a few exchanges with Polish colleagues, and I can say, if we take the biggest cities in two countries, the capital, Sofia and Warsaw, they have a lot of similarities in the heating model. It is not what most colleagues from the western part of Europe understand by district heating. It is these huge central heating systems, and that's how we call it, at least in Bulgaria. We call it central heating. And it's usually covering a big part of a big city with one or a small number of existing fossil fuel generating facilities. So the transformation of such huge facilities is a very, very difficult task. And I wouldn't only say expensive one. It is certainly expensive, but it is a very serious engineering challenge. And furthermore, there is no obvious solution. So you don't know where to go because this is obviously the first question. The next question is how, just technically, and third question is how much financially. But we don't have the clear answer of the first question. With what do we change the generating power of this network if we are to keep them? And if we are to close them, how do we hit the population? Of course, as mentioned by the opening remarks, the Polish case is more difficult than the Bulgarian, although we also have harsh winter. But yes, I've been in Gdansk, I've been in Warsaw. It's worse than Sofia or Plovdiv in Bulgaria. It's very, very cold. So you need a solution for everyone. You cannot leave families behind when it comes to winter heating. And also with this continental climate, we have pretty hot summers. Cooling is also a question. Here I would, just before closing, in order not to take too much time, say that Sofia in Bulgaria is a very interesting example. And it's the example of tens of thousands, and I'm certainly not exaggerating, families moving from the existing central heating to electrification of the heating of their own apartment. And you have a very interesting patchwork with building blocks in which some of the families are using the central heating system, and others have switched off. And they're using usually high-efficiency air conditioners both in winter and in summer. So something that we tend to call heat pump, but it's more well known as AC in Bulgaria for many years now. Because it seems more effective, cost-effective, to use electricity, at least unless you have the regulated market of electricity and prices somehow bearable. This makes, by the way, the very heating systems very inefficient, because when you have some of the consumers using the service and other not using the service, maybe paying only some minor share because they have the central installations in the building, so on. This makes the service more expensive for everyone and more inefficient, I would say financially unsustainable on the central level. So this is a model of transition, but it has proven for the moment to be unsustainable model, a bit chaotic. This is usually just personal decisions taking over time. And I'm sure when we have more questions, we can talk about the alternatives. But once again, I insist we don't have a clear, undisputable alternative to the central heating systems in Central Eastern Europe. And this is the main question here.
Yeah, and I think that question of consumer cost is really going to be key. As you mentioned, it's called central heating in Bulgaria. It's also called that in the United States, where I come from. So it has different names depending on what geography you're in. Let's go to Julien next from Energy Cities. So we know that a lot of these decisions are taken at local level, obviously. So tell us a little bit about what is the role of local authorities when district heating systems are being developed or upgraded, and how do they integrate those decisions with their local decarbonization strategies?
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Thanks for the invitation. Yes, Julien Joubert from Energy Cities. We are a European network of cities across the EU. And so we are working with many cities, and of course, district heating is primarily local infrastructures, and municipalities are really key to develop district heating. So they are always almost part of the district heating development. They are often the owner of the infrastructures. And the very important point is that the development of district heating require integrated energy planning and urban planning. So looking at the energy system as a whole and also the development of the city. It's also often require an extensive engagement of the population and the stakeholders. And I think it was already said with some example, like you need to keep the trust of the people in the system. And often it's key that public authorities are backing the project. Almost all cities I worked with, they plan to extend their existing networks or build new one, in fact. So it's really seen by local authorities as the key infrastructures which is already there, which of course have challenges like modernization, increase the energy efficiency, decarbonization, but it's not something to shut down, according to us and what we discuss with our members, because it can allow to tap into different local renewable energies like geothermal, solar thermal energy, biomass, and others. And it can bring security of supply to territories locally. So yes, indeed, it was explained, often the old system, they are based on just few central fossil fuel thermal station, but the new generation of district heating is more based on several thermal stations based on different renewable energy, which needs to be integrated in the system. And that's the advantages of district heating. It can use different energy resources. And at the time we discussed the question of security of supply, especially linked with natural gas, it's really important locally. What's really important to develop the district heating, it's to have a comprehensive look at the decarbonization of the heating sector at a strategic level and not only project by project. So district heating should be integrated in the overall energy system, and it can bring a lot of benefits. If you think about having an industrial heat pump connected to your district heating, for instance, when the price of electricity is low, you can heat your district heating. So it's provide energy storage capacity in the overall energy system. So it's really important that it should be looked together, and it should be defined where district heating should be deployed and where it should not be deployed, because a solution for everyone should be proposed to every citizen. And that's the role of the local authorities. It was already mentioned, the new obligation for the local authorities to of more than 45,000 inhabitants to develop local heating and cooling plants, which will come. This obligation also said that the member states should support technically and financially the local authorities to do these plans. And we have just done an assessment of the national legal and support framework existing in the EU to support local authorities to do these plans. And the reality is that only 2 countries have a quite good support framework. It's Denmark and the Netherlands. And it's quite interesting because regarding district heating, like Denmark is historical district heating market, while in the Netherlands they have almost no district heating, and it's really new system, so they need to introduce that. So it's really, we can learn from these two the example about how moving forward and how supporting local authority to do this plan, because without a good support framework, the reality is that this plan might not reach their goal and should be too poor and not possible to be implemented because of lack of access to data, lack of funding for cities, lack of technical support, and the cities often lack staffing resources. For example, last year we had a study which estimated that local authorities, I mean public local authorities, they are missing around 200,000 full-time equivalent employees to drive the decarbonization of the building sector. I might stop here and we can continue the discussion.
Thanks, Julian. That's quite interesting how you say that these 2 best in practice for support systems are one country with legacy systems, Denmark, and one country that didn't have legacy systems, Netherlands. It shows that actually this is a something important for both types of countries, the countries new to the game and the countries old to the game. Dorota, let's turn to you next. So we heard from Maris that there are various parts of the Fit for 55 package that will affect district heating. And two of the quite important parts are the Energy Efficiency Directive and the recast of the Renewable Energy Directive. How do you assess the final conclusions of those pieces of legislation and how they're going to affect the district heating sector?
Thank you for this question. So it is difficult to assess the final conclusions in a simple way. Definitely the final conclusions are better for us than first proposal because taking into account our specification of district heating systems in Poland, definitely the issues related to the legislation as related to district heating systems are very important for us because, as Mr. Szczeszek said, more than 40% of Poles use the heat from district heating systems. So we as PTZ we did some reports, some analysis where we assessed the final conclusions of the Fit for 55 package, especially taking into account the EED directive, RED directive, EPBD pre-final conclusions, because as Mr. Kanev said, we are still waiting for the conclusions and final decisions related to the trilogue process. And it is the directive. And as Mr. Szczeszek said, the total cost of the district heating systems transition in Poland, it will be more than 90 billion euros until 2050. It's definitely much. And what is also important, as Mr. Kanev said, the problem is how to transform the big and the biggest one district heating systems. Because so taking into account our conclusions, including in this analysis, we see that it's impossible to divide, for example, district heating systems in Warsaw, in Gdańsk, in Krakow, in the smallest ones. And it's also impossible, for example, to divide the district heating system in Warsaw for individual buildings. So, for example, it's impossible to install the photovoltaic installation empowered the heat pump for each building, for example, in Warsaw. And besides the economical analysis within this report, we tried to assess which kind of technologies will be possible to implement in each kind of systems, because we, during the analysis, we divided the whole heat market into the smallest ones. It means we analyzed the heat markets depended on the size of the market, for example, from 0 to 20 megawatts of ordered heat capacity by final customers, and we analyzed the 6 sizes of these heat markets. And what was the conclusion of this analysis? Now we know that, for example, until the 2045, the CHP units will be definitely needed to empower the biggest district heating systems. and because we need some big stable power unit in this system. Of course, we see the potential, the other kind of units, for example, biomass units, geothermal, definitely something like a game changer will be power to heat technologies and using the electric boilers empowered by the excessive renewable electricity. And but of course we need to implement some specific regulations into our national legislation. But everything depends on the local conditions. It means in some places there will be impossible to supply enough biomass, for example, and switch some system in, for example, in Krakow from some fossil fuel, of course, not only fossil fuel, switch into biomass and biomass. Supplied so big city by only, for example, biomass. It's impossible. Yeah.
So Dorota mentioned the implementation process that's now going to be happening with these pieces of legislation, and also that it can really vary by locality. So Maris, as we now move forward into a transposition and implementation phase for the Fit for 55 package elements that will affect district heating, it's difficult to legislate at EU level because, as we've heard, the situation can be quite different. We have these countries with legacy systems. We have countries that don't have systems but are now interested in having them. How much wiggle room has been left to national governments with these various directives to cater the provisions here to their individual circumstance? And how different is transposition? Well, transposition should be the same, but how different should implementation be across different EU states?
Well, thanks for a good question. So what we see is that first of all, not all the European countries have the district heating systems, and approximately half of them will be affected substantially by the new definition. So, and what we can expect from the implementation is that what we have foreseen in the directive is that the member states have huge possibilities to define how they approach to the district heating sector and what they are going to do in the district heating sector. So European institutions set the minimum for the investment support to the district heating transition. Member states have now the freedom how exactly they are going to do that, and these planning provisions, this is something where the EU doesn't have that much competence to regulate how the dispatcher plans are going to be developed in the local level in the municipalities. It's pure subsidiarity what comes into the scene in this point. So we have set the minimum rules for how to finance the district heating sector, and the member states have now great opportunities to find their own route towards the decarbonization of the district heating and cooling.
Julian, Matt just mentioned that a lot of this will be up to local authorities. So how do you see the implementation process going with local authorities? And also, I wonder if you could respond to Dorota's point about it being difficult for a large city, you couldn't supply it entirely with biomass. It would be also difficult maybe to break up the system. Is this also your experience that the size of the city is going to make a very big difference here?
Indeed, the implementation will be quite different locally, depending on the resources, and it's really why there should be these local heating and cooling plants having a broad overview of all the potential of renewable thermal energy available, and also what is the demand. Because the goal of the heat planning is to bring together the supply side and the demand side. and looking at also, I mean, the matching of the two and how the two can evolve together. And it's quite important for district heating, because also one component is that once you start renovating the house, you start reducing the demand and it's better insulated. You can bring heat at a lower temperature to the house, which means then you can integrate local, I mean, renewable energy sources at lower temperature, like I give an example, solar thermal energy, it's provide heat at around 70 degree, which like a CHP unit, they can provide heat at very high temperature, even above 100 degree, for instance. So if you are able to reduce, I mean, to insulate the house, reduce the temperature flow needed in the house to heat them, then you can integrate other renewable energy. Regarding the question of the size of the city, I can give different example. Like if we look in Vienna, for instance, Vienna is also a place where CHP plays a huge role, because it's where you have also production of electricity for most of, I mean, a big part of Austria. So they rely on that a lot. And now the strategy is not to go to biomass, but really much develop geothermal energy. And also heat recovery, I mean, waste heat recovery, so heat wasted in industrial site and so on, and go with electric boilers as well. And here, green gases should just play a smaller role just to balance this huge district heating grid, for example. But it's the same in Munich, for example. They have a huge plan to develop deep geothermal energy, and as well as shallow geothermal energy for renovated houses and smaller district heating system. And I agree that we cannot use biomass to decarbonize all the district heating system everywhere in Europe, because there will be a lot of tension on the biomass resources. It was one of the points, like Helsinki realized, for example, 3 years ago, when they launched their Helsinki Energy Challenge, to find a new solution to decarbonize their huge district heating. I mean, 98% of the city in Helsinki is connected to district heating, so it's really massive. And part of the solution was to really develop thermal storage, solar heating, and electrification of heating via district heating, because it's bring a lot more flexibility in the energy system. But if you do at the local level, so I think there are a range of solutions which are local, like solar thermal energy or geothermal energy, which have been overlooked in the past in the EU policies. And if I can give an example also, in Denmark, there is more than 1 gigawatt or solar thermal capacity to supply district heating system. And Denmark, I mean, it's quite north in Europe, and I mean, this, if it can be done in Denmark, it can be done elsewhere. And I know also in Poland that there are some demonstration project, pilot project to integrate that kind of technology. But it's also true in Latvia and other places where district heating is well developed.
Radon, when you've been working on these issues in the European Parliament, what kind of considerations did you give when you were, when the Parliament in general was making amendments to the specificity of the needs of different types of cities, and also the starting point of different countries with district heating?
So most importantly, we don't have to prescribe technology. We have no universal recipes for solution. We know the goal, it is to decarbonize heating, including existing district heating systems, or building new low carbon or decarbonized district heating systems. Once again, I say, for me, it's more than obvious that existing central heating systems in big cities are most difficult to deal with. And most importantly, we have a number of solutions. And I was listening very attentively to Joubert. I've been on many meetings and exchanges regarding district heating and district heating decarbonization. They are really a cocktail of solutions, very interesting, most of them. And in my point of view, more than obviously, none of them works by itself. If we speak of town of 200, 250,000, let alone several million inhabitants, there cannot be one solution replacing, for example, fossil gas combustion, which is fairly simple to operate. Of course, I come from a city which has huge geothermal reserves. So we are looking in this direction. We are assessing the opportunities to move from natural gas to our geothermal resources, and maybe they'll be able to cover a significant part of our needs. But this is obviously not the case of many other cities that don't have this precious asset underneath. And furthermore, the use of geothermal resources on such a scale has never been done. So we have a lot of open questions from both engineering, geological, and also financial point of view, how working it is. Obviously, solar thermal and thermal storage are very, very important option. Once again, it is more than clear that there might be periods in which it does not work. So it cannot be the only solution on the table. We have waste incineration. Okay, let's use once again the example with my city. Absolute no-go, closed between 4 mountains. So no citizen will allow to have waste incineration facility. By the way, it was tried exactly as an element of modernizing our central heating system in Sofia, and just look at the outcry of the population. It's definitely impossible to do it, which is completely different from Vienna, well known from these awful windy days in winter that are cleaning the air around the Danube. So we need to consider cocktails of solutions for each particular case, which is most obviously something that cannot be done on Brussels level, but I would say it can hardly be done even on government level in a bigger country. You need a very sophisticated balance between national government, local authorities, and yes, you presented me as a center-right member of parliament, such I am. I think that the innovative power of business can never be replaced by any level of authority. So we need a very, very good cooperation with businesses who might provide solutions that our minds are not inclined to find.
So Dorota, we've talked about the limitations of the district heating systems in the largest cities. How can they be decarbonized then, given those limitations? And also, separately, what would you say is the general trajectory of the transformation, the transition of district heating systems in Poland?
Mm-hmm. So, starting from the second question, there is not only one general direction of the transformation of district heating systems in Poland. As Mr. Kanev said, there is not only one solution for each city, so we need to take into account the specific conditions, local conditions, and availability of some fuels, some energy sources, for example, geothermal, and or for example, if it comes to large-scale heat pumps, availability of the low source for using this. So we see that in the biggest cities in Poland, now we are switching the fuel from coal to especially gas. of course, we try to use for example, the biomass, the waste, for example. Of course, we know the limitations related to using waste after 2030. We think that we try to find some enough good solution, but what is important for us? Of course, we used some additional solution. For example, we try to implement the hybrid installation, for example, in individual buildings which are connected to the district heating. We try to use, for example, some installations with individual renewable energy sources, and we try to implement this. But from our side and from our point of view, the most important thing is financing and how to deliver the heat to our final customers, and not to burden on final customers, but by high heat prices, for example. And we need to try, in taking into account, of course, the local planning by local authorities, the best solutions, the cheapest ones for final customers. But we know it's difficult. Now it's also difficult to find the solutions for the biggest cities after 2045, because we see potentially the possibility of using the green hydrogen, for example, but this technology is not enough developed now for planning the commercial using in, for example, 20 years.
Radan, you mentioned that for some countries that don't already have district heating, it can seem like this new exciting potential, mostly in the West, and then for countries mostly in the East that have district heating already, it can seem as an old solution. There's also a reputational aspect there, right? I know I mentioned we also call it central heating in the United States. It's not so common, but one of the cities that has it is New York City, where I'm from, and it has central heating has a very bad reputation. In New York City, I've lived in central heating apartments. The only way to turn down the heat in the winter is to open a window. People don't generally like it. So how do you fix the reputational problems that you face in countries with legacy systems to say, hey, actually, this does have potential to be a new thing as well?
So if we need to be utterly realistic, I would say in my country it's beyond repair. But of course, we need a dose of optimism, and we need a big change in the way these companies perform. For example, we had this discussion whether it's state-owned, whether the decision is taken on state level or a local authority level. In Bulgaria, for example, the Sofia district heating, by far the biggest consumer of gas in the whole country, by the way, has switched ownership between the municipality and the state several times. And each time it's because the present shareholder doesn't want it. It's not that somebody wants to take it. It's that somebody wants to get rid of it, along with all the reputational problems which amount to political problems when elections come, especially if elections are in the cold season. One huge problem we have and we cannot solve is total unpredictability of the bills, which is rather different from electricity, where it might be expensive if it's cold and it's cheap if it's hot winter. But with central heating, it's totally unpredictable because you have these central installation, hundreds of thousands of consumers, huge losses of energy on the road, which, by the way, is also obviously very bad for the climate because you waste energy all along. There are a lot of small steps to be taken in order to repair this bad image, but it will be an extremely difficult task. But we need to do it in some way. Let me say one thing positive. Switching from coal, hard oil to gas more than 20 years ago was a huge benefit for air quality. Because we speak of Fit for 55, we discuss EED, EPBD, RED, etc. But we also have the Industrial Emissions Directive, we have the Ambient Air Quality Directive, and they are making the puzzle even more complicated because sometimes the more climate-friendly solution is not the one leading to cleaner air. For example, biomass is detrimental in locked cities, in valleys, and so on, whereas natural gas is good for the air quality, quite bad for the climate. Of course, coal is bad for both, but then sometimes it's the only fuel available and the only local asset that we have because gas we do import. So when we run out, it was, by the way, the same date when the Kremlin cut off the gas supply for Bulgaria and Poland. We were the first countries to suffer that after the outbreak of the war, 27th of April last year. So in this situation, you might need to switch to hard oil or to coal, which deteriorates the quality of your air and the health of your citizens at the same time. So very complicated puzzle. And what I really hate is when our colleagues, politicians, present it as an easy solution requiring only some finance and some political will. It's much more than that.
Julien, on the local level, how do you think these reputational issues can be overcome and that people can be sold on the benefits to climate, to energy security of district heating systems in these countries that have the legacy systems?
Yeah, I agree. It's not an easy problem to solve. And there are a lot to do. I think it was said already, like, of course, modernization of the system. Probably there is one aspect which is also the question of transparency as well. And it's key to get the trust of the people. There are quite some debate, for example, in the Netherlands regarding that, which is a new DH market, and they want to increase what is the transparency, how people know what they are paying. And here maybe a good example also is from Denmark, because they applied a true cost principle in Denmark. So I mean, the cost should be based. I mean, the price should be based on the cost incurred by the district heating company with a lot of transparency, and heat is seen as a public service and not as a commercial service. So I think here it's quite important to increase the transparency, to involve also the citizen in the management of the system. I can give an example from a city in Serbia. They have a really big issue with increase of prices, and consumers were not happy, of course. But then they set up a consumer advisory board, which is taking part of the board of the district heating company and make the link with the consumer to discuss the issues the consumers have. So that kind of system, I think it can help. Of course, it doesn't avoid the question of investment to modernize the system, make it more efficient, and so on. But it's really important, and there should be a form of democratic control, especially if you start going on the way to ask for compulsory connection to district heating. I think it was said before. But yes, we probably need a market approach, I mean, the price signal is important. We have seen that with the increase of the gas price last year, which led to a decrease of consumption, energy efficient, I mean, more energy efficient behavior, let's say. So it's important, but it also can lead to the example which were given about Sofia and people doing the electrification of their own home on their side, not in a coordinated way, which is preventing, cost optimization of the entire system. And on the other side, I think planning can really answer that question to make a democratic collective choice and not go towards everyone going to its own individual solution, looking at its own benefit. And then at the end, everyone is losing. And we see that with local heat plan, I mean, our advisory is that the local authorities, given their local condition, they should give the mandate to do either mandatory connection to district heating, of course, with some barriers to protect the consumers, or they could be given also the right to ban fossil fuel boilers in some of their districts and so on, to foster the development of foreign alternative solution like heat pump, like district heating, but in a coordinated manners with all the people of the same area going toward the same direction, which really allow the optimization of the different costs. And it's coming. I mean, in the Netherlands, they just voted, for example, a law which gives a right to local authority to say that in certain area the gas supply will stop by that date. Or in Germany, also the new law discussed will give the mandate to local authority to ban fossil fuels in some of their districts. So I think it's, to go faster, we need new tools, and local authority need new tools to go towards like decarbonize heating solution. And that kind of tool, I think they are needed because we don't have that much time. When I discuss with people starting local heating and cooling in the Netherlands when it was introduced in 2019, for example, people were saying, well, we don't need to say to people which solution they should use. Most important is to start the discussion with them about what solution they would like and look at what is possible together. And then naturally, when you have this debate with the people, you can reach to a solution. Of course, you need to take the time of this discussion. And the reality is that now we have, I think, less time. The people are worried about the different system. They are lost. They don't know which heating solution they should go towards. And that's the role of the public authority in general, to give answers to that kind of question. I mean, we see in some cities, they are able, after local heating and cooling plants, to say to people, we plan to bring district heating in your area by that date. Or in this area, the cost-effective solution for you, it's heat pump individual one. So give clarity to people. I think it's also a way to rebuild the trust.
Thanks, Julien. So let's take some questions that have come in from the audience. The first question is about nuclear and district heating, which we haven't really talked about so much yet. Maris, this is a question for you. It comes from Guilherme from Nuclear Europe. Small modular reactors with customizable size and ability to be close to big population centers would be a great source of district and industrial heating, in many cases able to reconvert fossil fuel plants. What is the EU doing to ease and promote the deployment of this promising new technology?
Well, what I can point out here is that the Energy Efficiency Directive also included alternative definition of the efficient district heating and cooling based on the direct carbon emissions of the district heating and cooling. And this is actually an alternative that could be interesting for the nuclear power plant operators and could potentially for the small modular reactor operators in the future. So theoretically, it's possible to supply heat in the district heating systems from the nuclear power stations, and the option is there. So, and the EU can back this alternative also as well. But the main approach is to increase the share of renewables and waste heat in the district heating systems.
So next question is for Dorota. This question is from Sanjeev Kumar. What EU measures would help the Polish DHC system invest more in geothermal? 16 million euros from cohesion funds was granted to Szeged in Hungary to transition from fossil gas to geothermal. Would similar support be welcome in Poland? And also, if you want to come in on this question of the small reactors, feel free.
Okay, so if it comes to geothermal potential, so to be honest, there are many investment processes in Poland related to the different stages, of course, of the investments in the geothermal sources, making availability using this source, but everything, as I previously said, everything depends on the local conditions. It means some geothermal sources are possible to use, for example, for some district heating systems, and some of them are not. So we see this potential. Companies are making some recognition of this potential, but the major part of potential using this technology in different systems depends on the especially technical and economical conditions.
Okay, so the next question is for Radan. The question is from Anna Bajomi. In many Central and Eastern European countries, the majority of rural poor households burn polluting firewood and coal in old stoves. Firewood is accounted as renewable energy. The Energy Efficiency Directive's heating and cooling plans leave out rural areas from their scope. Can small-scale district heating systems be a sustainable and affordable alternative of solid fuel heating?
A simple answer is yes. They could. Not so simple. It's very, very problematic where the investment should come from, because we have, I would say, everywhere in Eastern Europe these problems with regions really left behind, where you usually have a population which is overaged with very low incomes. The municipalities themselves have no fiscal space whatsoever. Usually because of these social reasons, the property taxes are very low, amounting to several euro yearly per household. So the own resources that local authorities possess are zero. They maybe could sustain themselves as administrative expenses, maybe even rely on state budget for sustaining this basic functioning of the municipality. Obviously, there is no clear incentive for business to enter with an investment proposal because there is no capital return option from a very poor population. So, frankly, I don't find this realistic. More realistically, you can maybe offer support through social climate fund and other opportunities for heat pumps and simple and cheap ones, explaining to people that it won't be more expensive. It will be either cheaper or same expense monthly as the solid fuel that they are normally exploiting for heating. Once again, it won't be an easy task to persuade elderly people who have their traditions, their habits, their fears of electricity prices, but this could be an option. Building district heating in really underdeveloped regions, in my point of view, is a void idea. It's a nice one, but it won't work. And if you allow me, I would say same for nuclear reactors. Let's ask the population of Sofia or Warsaw whether they want a nuclear reactor in the town. The answer will be no. That's maybe it's not the right answer, but in democracy it's what the citizens say. That's obviously one of the biggest handicaps of democracy, but we still love it.
Maris, would you agree with that characterization for the small-scale district heating systems, the potential there for rural populations?
Well, yes, I can agree, but what we haven't heard today that much in this conversation today is that what we really need to focus is actually the energy efficiency and energy saving at home. So this is something that shouldn't be underestimated when we are talking about the future of district heating. So hand in hand with the improvements on the supply side, there should be also the improvements on the demand side, and energy efficiency of the housing stock isn't that good in Europe in general, and central and eastern part of the Europe, the buildings can be significantly renovated and their energy demand can be reduced, and then it's easier to meet the energy demand in these district heating and systems, and there will be not so challenging to find out what could be the supply solution for the district heating systems. So therefore, in poor households, first thing is to find out ways how to improve their energy efficiency and then decide what could be the supply option. But when the regions don't have that good potential for the implementation of the district heating, individual heating solutions are perfect and can be used widely also.
I definitely agree.
Yeah.
100%.
So the next question is for Dorota. The question is from Flaminia Bonani. In the report by PTEZ, it's mentioned the security of supply and heat electricity is a key condition determining all investments process. To what extent do you think current discussions could help rethinking the energy security idea and drive investments more on the demand rather than the supply side?
Okay, so in the report, of course, we indicated that what is important. So the supply the heat to final customers is the main goal of local authorities, and of course energy companies, which that are the operators of the district heating systems. And what is important in case of focusing on the demand aspects, it's the potential of the reduction of the heat demand from the final customer's side. So in this report, we calculated and we did the forecasts that the potential of reduction of the heat demand until 2050 it's from 30 to 45%. In the district heating systems, the bigger value, including the rather the small scales district heating systems, we found the big potential of using the district heating for heat for hot water use. And of course, we take into account the demand side definitely it's that during the planning of the each district heating system transition, it is important to take into account this aspect. Yeah.
Okay, the next question is for Maris. This question is from Nicolo Manari. The Energy Efficiency Directive contains provisions on district heating as well as others on data centers. Do you see a future for mandatory waste heat reuse coming from data centers?
Well, yeah, good question. So, yeah, it's really up to the local circumstances how the heat from the data centers can be used. So, data center developers have many different considerations how to locate their data center, and fortunately, this closeness to the potential consumers of the energy and the closeness to the residential areas is not considered as an asset sometimes in the data centers. So especially these that are handling data that require really secure solutions to ensure the operability of the data centers. So it's really up to the developers of the data centers, and I don't feel that this prescriptive approach on the legislative side is a solution to ensure the best outcome from this industry. So, of course, data centers are very much welcome to contribute to district heating systems and their decarbonization, but we should be careful and also listen to the other side in this point to maintain this high standard of the IT services in the EU. On the other hand, also think about their sustainability.
So next question is for Julien. His question is from Sanjeev Kumar. Local distribution system operators, DSOs, often prepare their network infrastructure plans without the political orientation from local authorities. Would a mandate on DSOs to plan and invest in local renewables facilitate this alignment? What else could be done to foster cooperation?
Yeah, I quite agree with what's said, that the planning of the energy infrastructure done by the distribution system operator, especially for electricity, but also for the gas network, is rarely done in accordance with the plan of local authorities, and it's something we advocate for also in the revision of the gas package. We all know that to reach the goal of the EU, we need to fade out the use of natural gas, but still there are investment and important investment done in the distribution and transport system of gas at the moment, which is totally not aligned with the goals of the local authorities and anyway to reach EU goals. So they should be, now that there is heating and cooling plants obligation in the EED, they should be an alignment in the gas package, and distribution system operators should be obliged to do their planning in accordance with these local heating and cooling plans. That's something we are supporting really much. That the trialogue discussion are ongoing, and well, it's something the European Parliament is pushing, and we hope that there will be an agreement with the Council and the Commission on that. That's for sure. And then just to add maybe on the question of the rural areas that I mentioned before, I mean, the EU states that local heating and cooling plants should be done by local authorities above 45,000 inhabitants at least, but we think it could be also smaller cities concerned by this obligation. There are examples like in Germany, in Baden-Württemberg, it's all local authorities above 20,000 inhabitants. So the more cities are doing this planning, the more it will help us to reach the EU climate goals. And they should get the support to do it.
Thanks, Julien. So we're just about out of time, but I did want to put one question very quickly to Dorota now I've lost it, but it said the gist of it was, can old decommissioned gas pipelines be used for district heating? I think the answer is no, but am I wrong? So old decommissioned gas pipelines, could they be reused for district heating?
No.
No, right? Okay, that's what I thought. I'm not a total expert, so I thought I'd check that. I want to thank the panelists very much for their contributions. Really interesting discussion, and thank you to the audience for some great questions. I think as we've discussed, we are now moving into a transposition and implementation phase on these. We have a couple open pieces of legislation for sure, like the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, but now we're moving into an implementation phase. So it's going to be really interesting to see how these various pieces of legislation that affect district heating are going to be applied in these different geographic areas, which, as we've discussed, come from very different backgrounds when it comes to district heating. How about a round of applause for our panelists? So thank you so much for those of you online for spending your lunchtime with us. And for those of you in the room, I'd like to invite you to a networking reception outside. Thanks. Take care.